Welcome to the Biz Bros Podcast. This is Kyle Nelson with his wonderful co-hosts Clint Payne and Eli Libby. Beautiful Central Morgan morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Yep.
Here in Bend, Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
How's
Crispy.
it going? Yeah,
Good. I'm doing great. Loving it.
So we're back at it with another episode.
Mm-hmm.
We just dive straight into it.
Let's do it.
We have a topic that we've chatted about a lot lately, and both internally on the podcast, but that would be the power of process.
Ooh, well, kind of a little Taylor in the back there, a little McConaughey. All righty. Well, yeah, let's kick it off. Why is it important to have a process in place? Just in general. Why is it important? What is the purpose of
It's a college question or something like on the chopping block.
What is the purpose of a process?
Productivity.
Boom. Efficiency.
Boom. Whoa, call you Barefoot Contessa and make yourself a recipe book right there. Wow.
Synchronization, yeah.
Synchronization.
Okay. Yeah.
Collaboration.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Buzzwords.
Yeah, I totally
Being
agree.
effective.
Yeah.
Effective. Efficient. I think somebody said that already.
Yeah, Joe.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's perfect to define it like that. But early stage, especially with what back in the results days, early on when you start the company, you get it rolling. You don't really think about. I don't really think the top of mind is like process. Like, okay, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this.
You're scrappy.
Yeah. You're scrappy.
Bootstrap. You're just like
you're trying to get it done.
Trying to make money.
Exactly, and you're trying to get it done, and until you get a massive amount of workload, that's when it breaks.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's absolutely when it breaks. So I think a good way to kind of go through this is some like best practices in creating a good rock solid process and like why somebody should actually do that.
Yeah.
When I create a process, I like starting at the end and working
Mm-hmm.
backwards.
Exactly.
You have an outcome, and you need to think about what does it take to create or to get that outcome. And usually I work backwards. Well, I want to make $100. What does that mean? Well, boom, boom, boom. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't have to be money based. I'm just saying, like, for example.
I totally agree. I agree. I think I start somewhere similar. I usually start. I think I back it up a little bit from outcome. I usually start like at the breaking point. Like where is it at? Like really, you look at the whole process or your quote unquote process you have, and like where is it failing?
Like why is that outcome either not meeting? Why aren't you getting it, or why is it so difficult or slow?
And you grab the scalpel and you dive in.
Oh,
Okay.
As a surgeon, and then you dissect like what is the problem, like what's happening, and that's where I usually start. What about you, Clint?
Who's involved, and then who's involved with it, to what level, and to what extent are they involved, and then how is their interaction, like how are they going to get to like that end result, and then what are the steps 1 through 50, 1 through 10 to get like to that point,
right?
But it's not I think for a lot of people, when you're thinking of like here's a process, here's some sort of way to do something, you're more focused on like just how can I figure it out, and maybe it's not the most efficient way to do it, but it's more about just trying to get some sort of outcome. But I think it's like who's involved, to what extent are they involved, like are they only in the beginning, or are they only in the end, or are they something that's after the fact, that's like, hey, we did this whole thing, and then like how does it restart, like what's the process to get it rinse to repeat, because that's how you obviously that's how you grow with any sort of process or business, unless you're cleaning your house for the last time before you move out or something like that. But a lot of things are rinse and repeat.
What do you mean when you talk about people involved, you're talking about both internally within, we're using pretty much the analogy of a company, and you're also talking about the clients that company associates with, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Perfect. I think that's a huge point, is that it's not always about the internal people that are involved with the day-to-day to like move that project to the next piece of the pipeline.
Right.
It's also about how does it affect the client, and how smooth can you make it for
a lot of loose ends you got to tighten up.
the client. Right. Yeah. I think clients are the first people that will break the whole process, obviously.
Right. But it's being broken because you don't have the process in place.
Yeah.
Right.
But they're the first ones, and they're the ones that are getting hit the hardest. Or maybe hit the hardest, but
yeah,
they're getting hit. They're the first people that see it.
And then clients, customers, team. the client, like typically the people who you're doing it for, or like the thing that you're doing it for, is like the variable. So like, client gets upset that you're delayed, and then like that creates like, okay, well, like in the process, like what have you done to make some sort of like a counter to that variable, right?
Right.
So if you think of something very, very basic, even inbound lead, salesperson, they go back and forth. From that point of them going back and forth, there's all these different variables. I don't have enough money. I can't do it until next January. I can't do it until next spring. I can't. There's all these different variables. But if you think about like well, what can you do to get like that whole process closed so that like your time that you put into it was worthwhile? Because if you're not putting like enough things into that process, if it's like a sales process and somebody came in and like, hey, I have $25,000 to spend on a video, but I can't do it until next June. So it's like maybe you spent a month with that person going back and forth, but then they finally told you, I can't do it until next June.
Yeah.
What's the process to keep that person up until next June, right? So I think that's where the base, like you have this like foundational sales process, but then you got to like think back to like, hey, here's the things that I can do between now and June to make sure Scott with the $25,000 wallet is still going to be Scott with the $25,000 wallet.
Yeah.
So
that's
stuff
true.
like
that's
that.
That's a difficult process to really work through.
Yeah.
Well, I think a good thing to tell listeners too is that they should create the foundational process very early in the business. It is going to morph, and there's going to change routes, but as a business owner, you should be thinking positively and optimistically that your business will get to scale and it will have a ton of overload and bandwidth issues. So you need to create a process that will hopefully adapt to that.
Yeah, I agree, but that's like,
it's tough to do.
It's almost impossible.
I think
like you don't know the growing pains until they happen. Like the growing pains we have.
Yeah.
Some of them we saw coming, some of them we didn't really.
I totally agree.
Certain processes in place we thought were solid. Now we're like, we got to figure it out now. But I do agree. Like instead of being like super like 10 different directions in the beginning, like
that's kind of
have a process for each of those directions. Don't just like jump into the pool.
I think
without a towel ready to dry you off.
Oh wow. Okay. Number 2. I think yes, that's kind of what I was getting at too.
Yeah. No.
But I also think kind of more where I was going with it is creating a process, whether it's going to stick for 2 months or if it's going to stick for 2 years. Something. But being able to get in the routine of actually sticking to a process. If this goes wrong, then I do this. If it doesn't go wrong, then I continue to move through these steps. But don't, even if it's a small client or a big client, don't veer off of that process and get yourself in a routine of, even if you're going to adapt and create a new process, you are already in the routine of, okay, I need to follow steps in order to get through that. Because I think some people get like, I'm not going to do that for this client, or this client's too small. I'm not going to worry about going through that extra step that I've laid out in my process. I think what I was getting at is just learn to be accountable to a process.
Right.
And then also too, like evolving the I think one thing that I think we've learned, and maybe one of the things that actually broke our process, because that happens with every company, is the addition of employees. And it's almost like with every new employee plus time, because as growth happens, you almost have to restructure your process. I think maybe what we focused on like hiring that employee. We brought him in, but then we didn't think about like the afterthought, 2 months down the road when they start cranking. And then we were a part of maybe that like foundation beforehand. Like that's when having this like new employee with this new vision and like these new skill sets and like these new things that make them who they are, they're different than like how we thought we were. So that's where I think like whether something's broken or not, I think it's always good to revisit just like a process. And does it work with like who you have 100%. On the team?
That's a great point. I really like the point of hiring and bringing on people, because I think people look at bandwidth issues and they realize, that we need an employee to fulfill this job. And then they bring them in and there's no process behind, whether that's as simple as like onboarding them and getting them like up and running and getting them like comfortable, like they have everything set in stone, like day one, they know, like even like job descriptions, like they have a good path.
You know, I find it.
No, I was just
I
saying.
find it interesting. You know, some of just from our perspective, some of the partners that we work with that are very large firms, hundreds, if not thousands of employees. Just to get them onboarded as a partner, like you see their process,
100%,
and it opens your eyes. Like, whoa, like they know processes.
Mm-hmm.
Where other smaller partners of ours, it's just like, we need
Spray
media
and pray.
assets now.
Yeah.
Like, we need them now. We'll figure everything out later. And then these other ones, it's like, it's 9 months until we finally see that first client.
Yeah.
Where we're still waiting. And like, you think you're kind of like in the dark, but really they come back and say, hey, you know, we're still fine tuning everything. Want to make sure, you know, but that just shows like over a decade of having a well-established business with hundreds, if not thousands of high-level, very talented individuals, like how important a process is and like the implementation of it. Because if company A, Fortune 500 or an IPO'd company, brings on company B, who's a small to medium-sized company, and that process isn't there, company B can screw up a lot more than just the process that they're working with, but it can screw up client relationships, internal teams, and everything. So it's pretty crazy to think like, and it's cool to see.
Yeah,
absolutely.
How important they are.
I remember reading a little something about that when Facebook bought out Instagram, and obviously Facebook has a bigger wallet.
Shout out to Shane.
But when when Instagram was like this, you know, call it startup tech company, founders obviously very smart people. I remember reading about just the pass off from like Facebook corporate structure to Instagram corporate structure, and even like as a company as big as Instagram, like at the time when they got acquired for like $1 billion, to be $1 billion company or to get bought out for $1 billion, you have to have some sort of process. But I think the fact that like they still saw the flaws with like the transition from like a $1 billion company to whatever Facebook is worth, I don't know, who knows how much. But the fact that I think they saw, there was a lot of articles, like tons of employees left because it was such a drastic change. And obviously like acquisition,
it was like the first big acquisition I think they did, wasn't it?
From like a public company, like it's different. But I think it goes to show that there's problems with process and structure and flow and communication and all of that with every company. But it's like, how do you adapt to it? And how frequently do you choose to like, hey, we have new employees.
Yeah.
We have people who are here. What are we doing to make sure that they're happy? And more importantly, that we can continue to grow and like follow through with what we do for our clients or customers.
That's huge. Actually a really good example.
I think of processes kind of like an FAQ, like database, like a front-facing FAQ, but it's more kind of internal. For example, like if your internal sales team comes to you and says, how do we go about handling a situation like this? Well, this is the process for doing that. It's documented. You're bringing on a partner. Like, what do you do? Here's the steps that you have to do and have to be completed before you can move forward. So if you do it right and you document your process right, you lay it out appropriately and tell associates where they can find it, it's really just like an FAQ type of database.
Yeah,
I think.
100%. I mean, documentation of a process is key. That's like level 2 process. You got level 1 where you're like figuring it out and you like apply and you do the process.
Yeah.
Level 2 is documenting it. I think that's a great point.
Level 3 is previous environment, previous job I was at. There was this lady and this guy. Oh man. She was a process Nazi.
Oh really?
Totally. But as my career has evolved, I totally get why. And there was this guy who was like this very, very smart dude. And his theory was that if you have a process and you have it 100% and you're very detailed, you can bring on, and at the time he called them ants. You can bring on any ant and you can add them to the farm and you can get them to multiply. So that was how their company grew to like 200 or 300 people just in sales and like other stuff. But the whole theory was like, if you have this process, anybody should be able to come in from like, and I know we've talked about that.
Yeah.
Anybody should be able to come in with like that talent. So maybe it's a sales bucket and that salesperson, here's their process of closing somebody.
Yeah.
Obviously, if the product is good enough and if they're a good salesperson, like you're going to get the result out of it. So I think that's where, how detailed can you get a process to the point where like your baby brother who's 2 years younger than you could come in and like close a deal or go take a photo or whatever.
Saying, yeah.
So I think point being said, I think it's very, it's more about, I think, just the foundation and then creating like the structure to grow with the process.
Mm-hmm. That's huge.
I agree. That's huge.
Yeah.
That's a great point. I kind of like the ant analogy. That's interesting.
Because there's lots of ants.
Oh, there's tons of them out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really like at a young age.
Oh, I'm sorry. But it kind of actually has to do with process.
Yeah, it totally does.
It's actually interesting.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's actually really good.
At an early age in elementary school, we learned basically how to like follow steps, and I think that translates into creating a really good, smooth process that anybody can do it.
I mean, it's our natural. Like,
it is.
It's just by nature we do that.
Mm-hmm.
We like steps. We like process. We like familiarity. We like feeling, like we're following the direction. I mean, really, because that feeling when you're like off process or off direction, and to guide yourself back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's
like to just piggyback on what you're saying, like from a young age, we are like hardwired for process.
Exactly.
Everything we do is a
Exactly.
process.
Here's how to do something.
Yep. This is how you make a bowl of cereal. This is how you brush your teeth.
And tie your shoes.
This is how you tie your shoes. This is how you read a chapter of your textbook.
Yeah.
This is how you take a test. Everything is process. At 8 p.m. or 8 a.m., bell rings, go to class. What happens now? Go to class, sit down, put your book away. Like, it's all process.
And then it comes back into the human nature and the human psyche of being in a routine.
Yes. And that is why when we don't have a process in place, like...
Exactly. Totally.
You don't have a process in place.
Process
it's like
is the gateway.
It is, dude. I'm telling you, like, when you don't have a process in place, that's why like humans don't like it. We freak out. We're like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? And it's like literally you feel like your business or your life is crumbling below you because there's no process. Or it's not a strong enough process.
I think it's safe to say that in terms of like maybe one of the most impactful places to have a process is for, or the reasons for having process is for employees. The more I think about it, the more we keep talking. Yeah, you can have pipelines set up. You can have like how that project kind of moves down the pipeline. But it's even more important to have those things like outlined for employees.
If each individual doesn't know their portion of the process.
Exactly.
Like you can have, like, that's a great point. I think that's where a lot of times processes fail is when you have the process, the pipeline, like it's so good, but each individual doesn't know where they fall into that. What part of the bolt are they? Where do they bolt on? And how do they tighten the process? Yeah. The pipe.
Yeah.
But then from everybody, because I'm not a big fan of, I think, people who are like, hey, let's just kind of figure it out. I think that works sometimes.
That's me.
But
I'll figure it out.
When it comes to like a business, I think it's just like, unless it's you, yourself, and you, like you're going to have a really hard time.
I completely agree.
Getting like growth. Yes, there's people out there that
have done it.
Or, and that's it. And they do it all. And like, I know a couple of those people, but it's like, there's going to be like this cap of like, this is as far as you're going to get. Because there's only so many hours in a day. There's only so many things you can do. And then you still have to have like the work-life balance.
Totally.
Of like, hey, I want to be able to go home and still live a life and not work, 20 hours a day and sleep for 4. Yep. Like that's no.
Yep. That's huge. I'm totally, I'll fall victim to that. I really didn't like strict rules. I think setting like strict guidelines around how somebody works and like the flow is like never the way to do it. But as a company grows and I see like why it is so important to have that, I am completely changed.
Yeah, no,
I'm
100%.
completely changed.
It's funny. I was literally thinking that at the beginning of the podcast.
Yeah.
Like,
used to be like, oh, yep, figure it out.
I would say we're fairly loose management. We're pretty, but like now it's like with growth, it's like, no, we have to have these processes and we have to stick to them. Even if there's like, even if not fight back, but even if there's like, pushback, it's like,
totally. And the long tail effect of it is total efficiency from a management standpoint. Employees, if they come to you with the same question every single time, if you can create a documentation place so that they can see that process, that frees up hours of your time explaining that and showing them, like, it should just be there.
Plus you have, I know you want to be able to go to Disney World. You want to be able to go to Bali.
Big fan.
Me, I want to be able to go somewhere too, but it's like,
but if the process is in place.
If you don't have the process, you're going to feel guilty.
Yeah.
You're going to feel guilty. I'm going to feel guilty.
Yeah.
Well, and the rest of us will be frustrated, not with the individual, but frustrated that's like, great, now we have to contact them on their trip that they're trying to unplug.
Exactly.
Totally.
Because we didn't get stuff done and figured out.
And there's always that thing in the back of your mind that if you are on a trip, it's like you don't really feel
no, you're not really
solid.
disconnected.
Well, yeah, that too, but in the back of your head, you're like, man, like, I still don't feel confident that the team is performing to the process we've set in place.
Right.
Because they're not set in stone and not cemented into the ground.
Well, we got 1 month till I go to Florida, so let's make sure we're figured out, because
exactly.
that email app is going to be deleted on the phone. No, but seriously, though, I agree. I do agree. It's like you're constantly thinking about, like, there's always something. It's always like, oh man, because I didn't take care of this.
Exactly.
Part, like this wasn't the process wasn't there.
Exactly, and it totally.
I agree.
Really, because I think I keep going back to the people, but if you create a really good process, it's really just about finding a good manager to manage that process.
Yep, 100%. That bingo, dude. Someone that will stick to it, like you said, the process Nazi. Like someone that will literally that is their job. It doesn't matter what or who or why. Like if
at the end of the day, it
wasn't correct,
and it wasn't the process Nazi. She wasn't mean, but she was just she had one responsibility for everybody, and it was to make sure that everybody was doing their job, and that if they weren't, it's like, what could she do to help them do it correctly? Because at the end of the day, it was just support. Like, hey, she was with the company for a super long time, and she just knew everything.
Sounds like a really brilliant individual, really. I mean, someone that knows every single piece of a company, like
yeah, absolutely.
Like her bosses probably didn't even know as much as she did.
Yeah,
probably. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
on a granular level.
Sounds to me like a very, very good COO. Like they're in charge of operations of the company. They know like every little tiny piece what's happening.
Operations manager or something. Yeah. Someone that is just like so dialed. With every single.
Because without that process,
difficult.
like
that's an interesting job.
without like without the process, you're still like, you might make all of this like progression and growth, and then like something happens, and then all of that hard work that you just did is gonna just die.
Yeah, I'm gonna piggyback on that. One of the best parts about a process that just kind of came to my mind is process is there for bandwidth, no matter what part of the company it is, what style company you are, it's for bandwidth. And that's, if you have the right process in line, you should know exactly when a new hire needs to happen to continue that process going.
Totally.
If there's a break in the process, most likely it has to do with, like, if your process is that well done, which that's the goal.
Yeah.
And they should be and can be, that means, you need to hire, or you need to like shift or like change, you know what I mean?
Wow.
Because otherwise, how else are you going to know?
I totally agree.
Guess? It feels like we need another employee.
Yeah. Totally. But really, you could be making those current employees way more efficient, which saves you money, saves your bottom line. You could be making them more efficient.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, that's like
that is like you. Yep.
Yeah.
I am glad we are all together.
Yep. So what are some things that like, I think because you're Kyle, you're different. I'm different. Eli's different.
I thought we were just gonna end at that. I'm like, thanks, man.
Yeah. I would say that when I think of a process, I think of like, where is it? Like, how are people going to understand it? Like, what are people like? You make this process, but like, are they going to get it on a very granular level so that they can actually like go do it? I think that's kind of where I kind of like to sit.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
What about you?
Wait, what's the specific question?
Just like,
I'm very visual.
Where do you, when you think of a process, like, where does your head go?
Documentation. Yeah. Visual documentation for me. I personally, and I think the more visual it is, because it paints the picture in the employee head. Like it's got to be documented, because it's kind of hard. The problem with like having a process that's not documented is like, you're going to miss something explaining. Like, it's going to happen. Yeah. You know what I mean? And then you have other people like, well, what about this? What about that? I don't know.
No, that's good.
I'm the first to say I'm not good at processes, so I don't. That's why I'm glad I have you guys, because you guys are good at them. I'm not. Like, I don't know.
No,
what about
good.
you, Eli?
No, it's good. I'm
awkward.
thinking no. I think it's a combination of two things: making sure that the process is not overcomplicated, and using a tool that is not overcomplicated.
Right.
However, that tool, if it's Google Drive, like that's not too bad. We experimented back in the day with a couple tools, and we tried to get very, 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 very detailed.
Super, like too much.
I think at that point it breaks because then people don't use it because it's so detailed.
Well, it's too time consuming.
So I think it's about using something that is like digestible that everybody can use and adapting to your company's like values and what you guys do. We're a visual company. We create media. We should be creating a visual process and something that everybody can digest, because at some point, everybody that's in the company has a little piece of creativity in their mind. I think then it's about creating tools that are easy and accessible for those employees to follow and grab and use as part of the process. If they don't know where that tool is, like email templates, for example, if you're telling them to hit these different emails, but then they don't have the email templates, like that doesn't help them at all.
Hey, you got to fix your email.
Exactly.
Okay.
Give it to them. Make it as easy and make it like less friction as possible to have that process continue to move. And like you said, Kyle, that employee is that bolt, and like how can they tighten it and move forward?
Right. Yeah.
The power of a process, ladies and gentlemen.
Yep.
That was just a short little deep dive.
Yep.
Into the. I mean, it is powerful. They're very powerful. I mean, you could argue that is what a company is nothing but process. It's nothing but process.
Totally.
It's like a processor in a computer or something. But anyways, okay.
Alrighty.
Thank you so much for joining us here on the Biz Bros Podcast. If you haven't yet, we've got this Instagram page at biz.bros. We'd love you to go and follow it and follow our journey. And tune in next time to Biz Bros Podcast on any podcast marketplace.
See you guys.
See ya.